All right, welcome back. Welcome to part 4. We're going to work on making sure all of our weapons are actually firing in this section. Now, a lot of this is going to be stuff that we've already covered before, but we are going to work with things just a little bit differently, mostly because we're working with one script to control the weapons. So I'm going to start off with kind of the most difficult one with that pistol. So I've got the pistol set up. I've got a few adjustments to the texture, to the materials and the shaders. What I've also done is I've brought in my old ray casting script from the last assignment when we were working with creating ray casting. Now the idea here is that rather than plugging this one into the camera or to any other object, I'm going to just grab this same stuff and I'm going to merge it with our weapon script here so that I'm keeping track of all of that in one script. Now this is how I'm going to start working with this. First I'm going to take all the variables that I know that I'm going to be working with up here. I'll go ahead and put those into the scene, so into the script so that I've got it. Second of all, any other start stuff, I want to go ahead and make sure I've got that working out. So I'll come and put that into the start scene there. The update is going to be the complicated stuff, so I'm going to hang off on that. But this enumerator of my gun effects, of course you don't have to have gun effects if you don't want to, but since I've got them, I'm going to go ahead and use them. I'm going to come and copy and paste that enumerator and place it in the scene, so I've got it ready to go. And then it's the update stuff that becomes important. Now remember, you can only have one method of a particular name in any one script, so I've already got an update method here. So here I'm going to start minimizing some of these just to make my script a little bit easier to read. So if I want to bring in all the stuff from this raycasting script, I'm not going to grab the entire method, but instead I'm going to come and select all of this stuff that is inside of that update method. I'm going to copy that and then I'll come back over here and go ahead and add that to this script. Now it's starting to get to be kind of a long script, 160 lines. So there's a couple different ways that we can organize how this stuff works out. One is with the idea of regions. I like these ideas of regions because what you can do is put a number sign region, and then I can call this ray casting. So I put a region there, and then down at the end, when I'm done with that region, so I'm looking down here, then you can put an end region. And what that will do is that now this region will have this new expand or collapse option. So I can kind of collapse all of my ray casting information into there. I could do the same thing up here just to organize my code a little bit. Let's make a region called weapon swapping, and then I'll come down here and end the region so that now I've got this region that I can kind of collapse so that it becomes a little bit easier to work with. Now what this will do now is that if I save this, it's going to be important that I come back and check that I don't have any syntax errors, which can sometimes happen when you're moving chunks of script from one script to another. But it looks like I'm all clean. So I'm going to come back here, I'm going to close down that raycasting script, and I'm going to take that raycasting script and get rid of it. Now some of the things though that we have to make sure that we do is, in this case, I've pasted all of that into my weapons code. But remember that the way that we built this mechanism last time is that we were raycasting from the position that this object is attached to, that the script, the position of the game object that this script is attached to. And so of course this weapon script is not actually attached to the weapons at all, and it's not even attached to the camera. It's attached to this empty game object, this script holder out here. So I need to make some adjustments here in order to make this work. Remember that whenever we see transform.position, what that really is GameObject.transform.position, namely the game object that the script is attached to. In this case, I don't want to do it from there. I want to be raycasting from the camera. So what I want to do is I'm just going to make sure that this script knows who the camera is. So let's make a game object, and I'm going to call it player cam, so that it's set up there. And then this player cam, this is going to be my the place where I'm going to start from. So I'm going to raycast from there, and I want it to do from in the direction of the player camera. Okay, so that should be fine. And then if I'm doing the ray, I probably don't need this anymore, but let's put that there, and then I'm going to paste that there so that we've got that set up. And then again, I'm listening for fire 1. This should be fine. Let's instantiate the bullet hole, blah, blah, blah. All of that's working out. And then here I've got this stuff with the zombies. I don't need any of that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete most of that. Later on, we're going to have to come back and talk to that area again. But this is just the basic idea of how that ray casting would work with that to leave a bullet hole. So let's come back over here. Now there's going to be some things that I'm going to need to tie up. So I'll go ahead and save that. I'm going to go ahead and tie these up off camera, but when we come back, we'll be able to take a look at them. All right, so we're back. I've plugged everything in using my stuff. A lot of this is much more complicated than you need to use, although you could essentially recreate it if you wanted to. Some of the things that I want you to notice, though, is that this script is starting to have a whole lot of variables. I want to do a little bit of further editing here to make this script a little bit easier to read. What I'm going to do is create some headers up here where I'm creating content. So in square brackets, you can call out a header, and then let's say that I want to call this section weapons. Now, you can set up these headers for a couple of different places. So let's say that I have one there, let's say that I have one here, and this is going to be my pistol stuff, right? Or whatever we want to have happen there. When I save those and come back into Unity, then once it compiles, then you'll notice that what happens is all of the variables here become a little bit easier to work with as a group. So the weapons, you can see those there, and there's the pistol stuff, and that's held into place there. So if I hit space, if I hit play here, now in this case I should be able to start firing my pistol and have that part work. Looks like my sound is playing on Play on Awake, so I'll make sure and turn that off. Okay, so I've got the pistol generally working. The problem is that the next thing I'm going to do is make it so that if I turn my pistol off, that the RPG, that I'm able to fire this rocket launcher. Now the problem here is that the way my current script is built is inside of the weapon swapping. Then what happens is when I press fire 1, it automatically is firing the gun, whether or not I have the gun active. So I need to make it so that it knows when I press fire 1 that this game script is able to keep track of which is the active gun. This becomes kind of an important thing. So I'm going to reorganize things here just a little bit. First of all, I'm going to come up here, and under the weapons, I'm going to create a public string that I'm going to call active weapon. Now, this just means this is just a word that's going to be being kept track of inside of Unity. By default, this word is going to be empty, but if we look there, you can see where it has this active weapon. Now, what I want to have happen is that when I start doing the weapon swapping, I want to change what the active weapon is so that I'm looking at a different thing. So here, when I hit 1, I want it to swap the weapons there, but I want to also say that active weapon, this variable, is going to be equal to the word pistol. Okay. And then in the same way, I'll come down here where we do the RPG, and I'm going to change it so that the active weapon is the word RPG, and then once more down here so that the active weapon is the word PSM. Now, this will seem to be kind of silly, what we're doing here, because all we're doing is changing this word. But let's turn these back on here really quick, and I can show you what's happening. So let's look right over here. When I start to play the game, again, I'm looking at this active weapon, and I hit 1, then do you see how that changes to pistol? 2, it changes to RPG, and 3, it changes to PSM. What that means is that not only does the game know, but the script knows which is the active weapon. If the script knows which is the active weapon, then suddenly I can come in and start to do other things, like when I press the fire button, have it have it behave differently depending on which is the active weapon. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to reorganize this a little bit. All of this stuff, this ray casting is working well. I'm going to come up here, and instead I'm going to listen for input dot get button down, and I'll listen for fire 1 up here. Now the general structure is going to go like this. I'm going to check to say if active weapon is equal to pistol, then let's just leave ourselves some notes. Do the ray casting work? Meanwhile, if we press fire and the active weapon is RPG, then we're going to want to fire the rocket. And finally, if the active weapon is the pigeon-seeking missile, then we're going to want to fire the PSM. Right? So because we're keeping track of what the active weapon is with just the string, we can go in and do it. Now there's lots of different ways that we can do this, but I think the string just sometimes is the easiest way to kind of see how this is built. Okay, so what we need to do now is we just need to move some of this stuff into position. What we're going to do is I'm going to take all of this information, this ray casting information, I'm going to cut it from here and instead put it right here inside of the pistol. Okay? And then I'm not going to worry about this fire 1 because I'm already checking for the fire up above. So what this will do now, let's just go ahead and reorganize that. What this will do now is that when I press fire 1, it's going to check if pistol is the active weapon, and if it is, then it's going to start doing all of this work where it goes ahead and ray casts and clones everything. So I'm going to adjust my regions here a little bit. Let's go ahead and put up, I'm not going to need it there because all of this is going to be ray casting region, so I'll probably clean this up just a little bit because it's really easy for me to just close that down as we've set up there. Okay, so let's save and go back and take a look at this. What should be happening here now is that I'm going to make sure that this is still open so I can see what the active weapon is here. But when I press play, and let's say that I push 1 so I got the pistol, then I'm able to fire the pistol like I should. And then when I hit 2, I'm not in the pistol anymore, and now every time I press fire though, I can see that it's not actually firing the pistol. All right. So now we can start working on the rocket. So we'll create the rocket launcher working out here. And I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because we've already looked at how to do this. There are a few things I'm going to do different, a little bit of sleight of hand stuff that I want to take care of here. So we'll do some kind of tricky stuff. The way that this works is that we've got an RPG that's set here. This I'm going to rename as my dummy RPG. The reason is that in a minute I'm going to just have that one delete or hide, and instead I'll bring another one out. So with this dummy RPG, I'm going to duplicate that dummy RPG, kind of slide it out here, and I'm going to pull this out of that group so that it's not there. I'm going to call this my real RPG. as we look at this real RPG, this is the one that I'm actually going to be firing as we go with velocity. So there's several things I want to do. First of all, you'll notice that the axis of this is in a terrible place, right? It's pointed sideways when I really would be best if it was pointed forward. Second of all, it doesn't have any colliders or any of those kinds of things on it. So what I'm going to do is make a new game object that's going to be the parent of this, put that real RPG inside of that, and make sure that the geometry there is actually all at 0, 0, 0. Now, what's happening here that becomes kind of important is that you can see that game object itself has its axis pointed in the right direction, and the RPG is a child of it with its axis pointed in the wrong direction, which is fine. In this parent game object, I'm going to make sure and add a box collider. I'm going to make sure and do a little bit of adjustment to that box collider so that it actually fits here. So, oops, come here, you. Let's get back to the side. So I'm going to resize this here and here so that box collider is good. And let's go here and here. So that's good. Let's look at this from the back. So we'll make sure and scale that into there and that into there so that it looks good. So that there is my RPG rocket. Okay. All right. Now, last thing is let's go ahead and add a rigid body to this. I'm going to make sure and make the mass really heavy so that it doesn't get blown off course if another explosion happens, but I'm going to turn off gravity, okay, so that the gravity isn't there anymore. All right, so the important things that happen here is that as I'm looking at this dummy rocket and where it's at, then the axis of it in relationship to the dummy rocket is actually in the same place as this RPG rocket that I've got here. Now I'm going to make sure that I have this rocket as a prefab so that I can instantiate it whenever I want. So I've started organizing my projects. I put my 2D assets in there. Here's my 3D assets. I've started putting all of my assets because it's starting to get kind of big. This RPG rocket, I'm just going to drag this over into the 3D asset so I've got this, this prefab that I'm ready to work with. All right. So the idea here is that when I press the fire button and the RPG is active, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this one. At the same frame that I hide this one, I'm going to instantiate the RPG rocket and give that rocket some velocity so it goes shooting forward. Now, in order to make that work easiest, what I'll do is let's go ahead and with this dummy rocket, I'm going to kind of set that there. I'm going to make a new empty game object that I'm going to call this rocket launch point. I'm going to make sure that rocket launch point, I'm going to make it a child of the dummy RPG just for a second, just to make sure that it's all 0. But notice I'm not changing the rotation. I want it to stay facing forward. I'm going to make that a child of my RPG. So this just gives me the location at which I'm going to instantiate my RPG rocket. Now, in my script, I can start to write the stuff that will make that happen. So let's come over here in the RPG. Let's think about the things that we're going to need. So first of all, let me close down this weapon swapping here. Inside the RPG, I know that I'm going to be instantiating that rocket. So let's come and start to work with this a little bit. Let's make a header here for RPG stuff. Let's make sure that this knows that it's going to have a public rigid body that's going to be the rocket. Let's call this rocket RPG because we're gonna, we'll just use rocket. I'll be fine. That'll be set up like that. So we'll go ahead and save that. Oops, looks like I got a problem there. Okay, so go ahead and save that. Let's come down here, and we also not only need to know the rocket, but let's make sure that this knows who the dummy rocket is. So that it has both of those. Okay, so let's come back over into Unity and start to plug all this stuff in before things get kind of crazy. So once this is compiled in my script holder, now I've got this thing that's looking for the rocket and the dummy rocket. So the dummy rocket is this dummy version right here that we'll get rid of. And the RPG rocket is the real one that we're going to be instantiating and giving velocity to. So I'll come down here now, and when RPG is the active weapon, what I want to do is take dummy rocket and I want to set it active to false. What that means is that it's literally going to turn that dummy rocket off. It just turns it off in the scene. Meanwhile, let's create a new rigid body just for this variable that we're going to call cloned rocket. And cloned rocket is going to be populated immediately by instantiating rocket at wherever. See, we don't know who our rocket launch point is, do we? Let's create a public transform here called rocket launch point. So we'll instantiate it at rocket launch point dot position and at rocket launch point dot rotation so that it matches where that is. And then let's take cloned rocket and give it some velocity. That will be equal to the rocket launch points dot transform transform direction, and we'll have that use the direction of the vector 3 dot forward, and let's multiply it by I don't know, 10. We should probably make that a public variable. Okay, so what's happening here is that when we press fire, it checks to see if the active weapon is RPG. If it is, turn the dummy rocket off. Meanwhile, instantiate the real rocket and go ahead and give it some velocity. So let's save that. Go and take a look here. This will now need to know who the rocket launch point is. So it knows who the rocket launch point is. At the end of that, oops. We know who where the rocket launch point is, where it's set up. We also know where the dummy RPG is at, and we know that we're instantiating that new rocket. So what will happen now is that when we press play here, then when I press 1 to bring up the pistol, then I can fire the pistol. If I press 2, then it instantiates that rocket. Now, of course, we do see this problem that this works really well the first time we fire the rocket, but not so well the second time we fire it. So if I hit 2, I can see that rocket leap off of there and it looks fine, but it doesn't actually reload that rocket. So just as last thing for this tutorial, let's go ahead and build that in. So I'm going to come in here and let's make another enumerator that we're going to call reload RPG. And what we'll do is, for now, let's have it wait for, let's say, 1 second. So let's yield return new wait for seconds. Oh my goodness. Wait for seconds. Let's have it wait for 1 second. And then what we'll do is we'll make dummy rocket set active, and we'll make that true so that we turn it back on again. And we're also going to do some other things, like we can't fire the rocket during that time, but we'll build that kind of mechanism in when we actually are constructing the ammo reload. Okay, so let's just double check, make sure that this works. So when I hit play and I hit 2 on my keyboard and I fire that rocket, then in 1 second, oh, we never told it when to start this reload RPG. So we need to make sure that after we fire the rocket, the last thing we do here is start the coroutine that is reload RPG. Okay. When we hit 2, we fire that rocket, away it goes, and then a new one pops back up when we're reloading. Alright, so plenty of other things we can do. For instance, probably need to make sure there's some smoke or some sort of effect coming out of the back of that rocket, making sure that this RPG rocket here does more than just kind of build this. You can put in what other particles you want on the back of it. But since the mechanism works here pretty good, all of that is just kind of visual interest that we've got set up.